You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. We're here to cover some of the county council meetings and the budget hearings for May 2025. And in order to talk about some of that, I brought in Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury, Mike Goldberg from Del Mar. Thanks for coming in, gentlemen.
Had no place better to go today.
Well, we talk about no place better to go. We sent Jim Atkins over to see the last of the budget hearings last week. So I want to bring him in later to actually break down the budget. But I want to get a little sense from you guys. I mean, what are you looking for, Joe, as we get into these last couple of weeks before they even vote on the budget?
Well, I think if you're looking at it from what I would call regular citizen perspective, it's what does the budget do for the people that are working in the county? What does it do long-term to our fiscal health? And ultimately, are the priorities that a lot of people expecting to be filled, are they actually being fulfilled? Okay.
Sometimes you get at the hearings and you're just talking numbers, but at the end of the day, it impacts real people, regular people.
If you talk to a teacher and say, what are you getting next year, and can that help you or not? Mm-hmm. This is where the budget becomes a real thing.
So, Mike, a little bit of perspective with someone who's retired, on somewhat of a fixed income. We know we're going to see the biggest budget we've ever had. They're going to go up every year, but do you feel like, having been at several of the meetings, that the priorities are straight so that we don't price people right out of the county?
Well, you always get heartburn at budget time because here's a handful of people deciding how they're going to spend our tax dollars. Mm-hmm. Now, are they going to spend that money for the benefit of their constituents? For the benefit of, employees, but to keep them there, we have to have employees. Mm-hmm. Or are they going to spend that money so as to further their political ambitions?
Well, I think, this is where transparency comes in, because sometimes there's a hard conversation. And I think, as we'll find when we sit down with Jim Atkins later, is I really believe we're being sold on there's a more rosy picture. And really, are we actually planning for that next rainy day? Because I think you would agree, Joe. Rainy day is probably coming, right?
I'm looking at this sitting as a state employee right now, where it's already pouring, and it's probably going to get worse. And so I really think that we're sleepwalking into some bigger problems that are not necessarily politically popular to address now, but real leaders lead. And whether that's an executive or a council member, I think we're going to, sooner rather than later, be confronted with that. It may not be apparent in the next 5-6 months. Maybe it will. But I definitely think beyond that point, we're going to see some stuff.
Just some of the notes I have. You're talking another $7.5 million for Sharps Point, which would bring that up to $10 million.
In the CIP, the Sharps Point dredging, it appears we're way behind. It's in as $4.1 million, and that was bonded, not in pay-go. Is that right?
So the recommendation between what was originally submitted was that Sharps Point would go to, I did not bring my CIP with me, but we would increase it to $7.5 million, and it would all be pay-go, because we did not feel that we could wait till November for the cash, that we needed the cash available in July, and that's why it's pay-go, and that's why some of the things were also shifted around in the bonding.
Because it's currently in the CIP as $4.1 million under general obligation bond.
And in the stuff that I provided for you guys on Tuesday, it's as $7.5 million of pay-go.
Pay-go.
And then there's some pay-go projects that have had almost no discussion. Yeah. And pay-go is basically the county funding a capital project out of fund balance. Mm-hmm. And as we covered, Mike, just a few months ago, we didn't even have the financial audit from year 24. So we really don't know what our performance is for fiscal year 25 as it's kind of closing out, right?
Well, there's no way to plan for the future if you don't have a financial history. And there's very little transparency, let's face it. The county council has more information than we, the public, do, but it's really the county executive who has and the director of finance who know the details, and I'm just greatly distrustful of the whole process. One of the reasons I'm distrustful of it is because the budget begins with the county executive. And the county council, they cannot increase a budget. All they can do is take away from it. Now, conversely, if you take a look at the state or the national levels, all budgets, all bills for revenue originate in the legislative body.
Well, there was a couple other issues that were raised by members of the county council and some that we raised, and the auditor, the internal auditor raised, that have not been addressed despite this, which is the P card audit. So, we're worried a little bit about spending and increases and that sort of thing, but there's been no further discussion about whether or not the P cards, which are like the debit cards used by departments, some of which were used to spend thousands of dollars on gift cards.
It's interesting, because the joke always, right, is that, this part of Maryland is always a few years behind other places. I can remember when I was in graduate school in Ohio that they had a series of scandals where administrators were using P cards to charge for things that had no relation to academics. And so we got rid of them because there was really a very flimsy way of accounting for what was actually being spent. So it blows my mind that we still actually have them.
Do you know one of the revelations that came out of the audit was we have twice as many P cards than we had 2 years ago. So you're talking about coming from Central Ohio, where they eliminated
20 years ago,
and in Baltimore County they just greatly decreased. And
we're
we're like,
doubling them?
No, let's have more.
But is that now who ultimately makes that call?
So there's supposed to be a policy in the finance department which runs through the executive's office.
So is it fair to say that Pam Oland is doubling the amount, or is it the executive? How?
It's hard to say, but the auditor's report basically said that we should be putting more controls on these. And whether you agree with having them at all or not, there's actually not any more controls. There's less controls because there's more of them.
So we actually don't know how much money is going out because of these P cards necessarily.
No, I mean, one of the things when I was doing my review through the online database, which is called Open Checkbook, is you just see if you compare prior to this county executive to this one, the amount of local meals paid for. It's not 4 or 5 times more. It's like almost none to that. It's very regular to the tune of about $20,000 a year, and we're talking one area.
Yeah.
So
imagine what it means for these other areas.
Well, we're going to talk about dump trucks later.
Yeah.
If you buy a dump truck and you don't know who paid for it, what it's used for, and who owns it, which department owns it.
Now, and just to clarify, they haven't purchased a dump truck with a P card to our knowledge. Right?
No.
Okay.
But we're also, and we'll talk about this later, we're spending upwards of $10 million to remove soil out of our soil holding, from dredging the river, because we don't have the equipment, but we sure do have 2 more dump trucks. And as we showed in some video from Safari at the Quarry, some of the dump trucks have been used to set up private Jeep events. So how do you have any faith that it's being used?
You can't have faith. And I think we have a fundamental problem in our county charter. And we've talked about this infinitum ad nauseum. There is too much authority that is vested in a single person, and that is the county executive. We do not really have a system of checks and balances because the county council, they have very little ability to provide the level of oversight. In a corporation, you're going to have a strong board of directors who's going to keep an eye, a very close eye, on the performance of the chief executive officer and his subordinates. His or her subordinates. We don't really have that in Wycomico County, and it's the problems are going to grow as the loose manner in which the county is managed. It's only going to get worse when you don't have
a lot of folks are going to find out when their tax bill goes up, and then they're going to want to know what happened when we could find out what happened right now. So. Well, let's bring in Jim Atkins. Joe, you stick around,
Yes.
and we'll sit and talk with him. So when we come back, we're going to bring Jim Atkins in from Mardella, who attends almost every single budget hearing and county council. We're going to get a sense of just the attitude of the county council as they go an inch closer to taking a vote on the budget. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. So the county is wrapping up the budget season, but to talk about some of the details that we have heard likely will pass through the budget via the hearings, brought in Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury, Mr. Jim Atkins from Mardella. Thank you both for coming out. Listen, we all attend a lot of the meetings. We all don't get to attend all of them, but we watch on PAC 14. There's been probably more budget hearings this year than at least last year that I can tell you. Let's start with the operating budget before we get into the capital budget. And Jim, I want to start with you. You were just at the last budget hearing, which was on last Thursday, the 22nd. What's the general sense of the county council's willingness to pass the proposed budget that the county executive proposed back in April?
I think that the council is really taking a hard look at some of the things that have been done in the past as far as approving funds for projects when there are not plans, drawings ready for that project, and just kind of writing a blank check.
Okay.
They have tightened that up a little bit, I really think, and I for a good part.
The one thing that stuck out to me was the EMS director position.
Yeah.
And now this isn't the operating budget, but there was a new position that the county executive proposed in the operating budget for
Yes.
fiscal year 26.
Yes, and that was proposed for supposedly going into a SWOT analysis as far as whether or not the county was going to have a countywide EMS program to supplement the volunteer fire companies, to also try to get some clarification as far as the Salisbury Fire Department coming out into the county and servicing the county and getting that straight.
If the council does not want to see this position, then EMS in the county, and us looking at that, is going to stop. So this is the next step, regardless of whether we do 1-in-1 or chase or whatever. So at some point in time, if we are going to absorb EMS or start looking at what that looks like, this is the next step.
The council asked the executive and the director of administration if that was a function that the deputy director of administration, when hired, would be able to do.
The executive's office gets an assistant director of administration, let them take the lead on that, like they were going to do before. Mm-hmm. So I don't see any need, she's.
I was going to ask the same thing, if the assistant director of administration could.
Look at this.
Throw the ball
Sure.
rolling on.
Yeah, I actually was going to have, HR was actually looking to do a risk manager position as well. And we cut that actually and said, we're just not ready for that yet. The assistant director would take on that as well. So I think it would be a good mix.
And they both stated that that was something that person could do. So instead of adding
Was it 85,000?
Yeah, they got a commitment that it was a job that the assistant administrator could do at that pay level. So
if I'm Joe Public and I'm watching events, my expectation would be that the next assistant director that might be hired at some point would have the qualifications necessary for this duty as well.
yes, that they would have fire and EMS background and be able to have some type of planning background, so you could figure out what was going where.
But more importantly, you talk about the SWOT analysis, and for anybody who was not aware, the SWOT analysis took over a year to do, and the results just came out last February. And basically, it got the volunteer fire departments involved, at least in the identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, part of a SWOT analysis. But they really came up with adding a ALS and a BLS type of EMT, a paramedic, at every fire department in the county, which would ultimately cost the taxpayers about $750,000 per year in salaries alone.
Yes.
So the county executive proposed that we basically put the boss in place before we even knew if we were going to be able to spend the money or we could even hire, would be 28 positions.
Well, not only that, but whether or not the fire departments, volunteer companies, and Salisbury fire departments were willing to give up that territory, because that is the 11 volunteers and the 3 paid companies all have territory, which is assigned to them, that they're responsible for it.
So basically, we're talking about adding another kind of cumbersome administrative position without consulting the actual fire companies and the people that are actually doing the work.
Well, no, they did consult them through the SWOT analysis. However, ultimately, if the county and the taxpayers are going to pony up another $750,000 each year in operating expenses, they're going to want some control over those ambulances in the fire departments. And growing up in the Parsonsburg Fire Department, I can tell you it's just not seen as a benefit just to have a county administrator come in and start to tell you what you're going to do with your ambulances, because the fire departments own the ambulances, not the county.
Yes.
And that also raises the question of what would prevent a future executive or administrator to just move resources when needed. Like, what happens if you have, an EMS person at one of these smaller volunteer fire companies, but it's maybe in a period where there's a need for 2 somewhere else? Like, who has the authority to move those?
It would have been that administrator,
right? Well, that's
so yeah. If you're happy with this county executive, fine. Maybe you like that, but yeah, you're right. In the future, somebody who's maybe elected from maybe even from an area that doesn't need 2, but they're like, well, I got elected, so I'm going to put 2 in my hometown.
Well, that's kind of interesting, because like these volunteer fire companies, they are very independent. They are very territorial, because there is a history and a culture there. So when you have a kind of top-down government apparatus come in, whether it's the executive or people in her office say, well, we're going to now control sort of where these positions go, perhaps, or how much we'll invest in each company. I mean, I look at that as like kind of a threat.
The biggest problem right now, in my opinion, is currently you have these volunteer fire companies who can't find paramedics to staff their departments. And not unwarranted, the pay is warranted and they should be paid, but they're not being paid what they can make across the bridge.
Right.
And when you work a 1 on and 3 off schedule, it's not uncommon for the paramedics in this county to be up in Baltimore and Arundel County on their 3 days off from here.
To work another job.
They're working another job, and they're making a lot of money.
Well, and I think one other aspect that's a challenge, especially for some of the more rural fire departments, is there's not enough calls to really keep the interest. I mean, someone who gets into being a paramedic wants to help people and save lives. You don't really want to sit days on end without any calls, even though you're needed when you're needed.
Yes, you have 2 levels. You have the gun-ho, they want to be busy all day long paramedics that would work in Hebron, Delmar, Fruitland,
Parsonsburg,
very, companies that run a lot of calls. And then you have the paramedics that are at the end of their stage of being a paramedic, that like to work in stations, that maybe get 1 call a day, 2 calls a day. They don't want to run all day. They've run for 20 or 25 years. They want to walk now. So, you run into that also.
Well, so we're talking about pay and that sort of thing when it comes to the paramedics, but also there was a lot of discussion about the pay increase, not just the raises, but the cost of living adjustment, which the county executive in her budget proposal broke those out separately. The cost of living would come in the first pay period in July, and the raise, the actual raise, would start in January, which is midway through the fiscal year. But part of that was also the department head raises, which could range anywhere from 0 to 31%.
So prepare a budget amendment with director and deputy director at 9%.
Yeah, do we have a consensus or not?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Says no.
Instead of these large increases on the department heads, that they would be basically capped at a 10% increase. Most of it was around 9%. And that the money that was saved by doing that versus the large increases would be spread out amongst the county employees.
The budget for the raises is not going to be even across all departments, but at the same time, there's not an employee evaluation for performance.
That's correct.
are they only relying on the Bolton study that they've done most recently to find the low, mid, and high point of every position?
I never really was a fan of the Bolton study to begin with when it originally came out. I thought that was how we addressed it. I didn't think it met the needs of the county at all.
Well, it seems like the administration in the county wants to keep referring back to the Bolton study. And the council keeps wanting to say the Bolton study is not the way to do this, that it's a contradiction. There's different ways to give people raises. One of the things that the council did ask the executive and the director of finance about was next year, as they get ready to propose these budgets, instead of saying, for an example, we want 5%, for each department head to come to the council and justify what percent they want for what employees.
And I would really think that if you're going to have these type of increases on certain departments, it would be good maybe even have closed sessions ahead of time where we meet with the department heads and they justify why these particular increases should occur.
Absolutely.
So, maybe not a true evaluation, but maybe a justification about why this person is going to get 6% and this person is going to get 3%.
Well, this seems like a really practical solution to some of these discrepancies. Is why not have the department heads come before the council, not have to go through the executive and say, hey, listen, as you said, this is what we need in roads, this is what we need in IT. Because that way you're actually hearing from the people that are on the ground doing it rather than trying to get some sort of baseline aggregate that the executive wants.
I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
I see 0% chance that this county executive is going to allow the department heads to come speak directly to the county council. There's no way.
I agree, but
I mean, I would love to be wrong. This is not one of those times where I would
she would
choose
never
to be.
allow it. But in a perfect world with transparency, it would be, I think, something that the public would really benefit.
One example that did happen was the state's attorney, Jamie Dykes, did come before the council, and she's a constitutionally elected, and Julie a lot of times will lump her in as
An
a
employee.
department head,
Yeah.
like the same as others,
Yeah.
and it's really not accurate. But she brought up, and we covered it in the show a couple weeks ago, the concern that the county executive had funded 3 of her open positions for prosecutors at the low wage on Bolton. She asked for them to at least be put at the mid-wage, and she had already hired 2 of those 3 people. Are they for that flexibility?
Yeah, no, they that was decided at the budget meeting that Jamie had asked for was going to be followed and accepted, to get them back at the mid-range where she was able to hire people that are qualified to do that job.
And manage her department.
Yes, manage her department.
Well, this is good. So what this means is that the executive has backtracked on defunding law enforcement, at least in this particular instance.
It was nice to see that our state's attorney, and she has a different platform because she can't be hired or fired by the county executive. She felt that she could speak freely. It would be nice to have more of the department heads to be able to truly do that. So the operating budget is what we just covered. I want to take a little break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the capital projects, both that are going to be bonded and the ones that are going to be paid out of fund balance. You gentlemen stick around for a little bit longer?
Sure.
So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the capital projects that are likely to be funded. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. So still in the studio with me is Dr. Joe Venosa, Mr. Jim Atkins. Thank you, gentlemen. And I want to spend some time talking about capital budget projects specifically. Jim touched on it earlier. And kind of let's wrap this up a little bit with the Verizon building, because this is the topic we covered 2 weeks ago. There are no plans. We've spent some operating money right now to get plans, and the county council's asked for plans as late as last December, but no plans have been produced. Just not an arbitrary number, but a number without line items, right?
Exactly, or what they planning on doing. I mean, there's been talk about refurbishing an elevator. There's been talk about adding another elevator, but there's no plans, drawings, or anything submitted to the council. The only thing that's been submitted to the council is the request for $2.75 million.
Not a small amount of money.
No.
So for the folks out there at home and beyond, the executive office is asking for $2.75 million for ostensibly nothing detailed.
Well, and
Just the building.
Mike Goldberg talked about this a couple weeks ago. You know, there's a certain amount of money that you would ever put on interior improvements,
Sure.
and 2.75 million on a building that you spent a little under $4 million for is not the right equation. I mean, this is somebody who used to do this due diligence work, underwriting loans and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But that's a whole different thing to some extent. This is essentially give us $2.75 million with no explanation.
And we'll see what we're going to do with it.
Let us put the financial, let's pass a budget.
Yeah.
And let's then come back with a well thought out financial plan that's going to tackle this to the best of our ability.
But even to me, more concerning about that is if you go back and look at the videos from January of 24 and February of 24, this building was sold to our county council by the broker and the executive's office and the health department office as basically not turnkey, but structurally
Almost move-in ready.
Yeah.
Verizon, we talked about the 2.7, removing that.
I'm assuming council.
Going to do.
I assumed council wanted that. That you were removing the 2.7, and thus we won't have the debt service. So that's what helps also swing the debt service numbers.
Correct.
It's a 2-story building. And you know, for ADA requirements, you have to have an elevator for human beings to go up and down. But the building was never purchased with the intention of moving large pieces of equipment. It's not like it's a hospital. We're not moving a gurney with someone lying in it. So, you know, it's a lot of money. And in the vacuum, I guess you could argue that, well, this just needs to be done. But we're earmarking money for the library.
And then the library, the Shoemaker Library, also to go from PAYGO to BOT.
Do we know the status of the library grant?
I do not.
Okay. I asked Seth. He says it looks good, but I just didn't know if there was.
I think it was on at the governor's level to be signed. I think, but I
good.
don't know. I don't know I forget what he said exactly. So please don't quote me on that. There is something on the agenda, an agenda request for the next meeting. So he could potentially even be here at the next meeting.
Cool. All right.
And then we've already earmarked money for the Civic Center renovations.
The Civic Center marquee, it was on the CIP as other Civic Center restoration, and now it's PAYGO on the proposed budget. But then it wasn't in the list of your changes.
Then I missed it.
What should it be?
It's I believe it's PAYGO.
Close to $10 million for Sharps Point to get soil out of there.
Even though we're getting 2 brand new dump trucks to haul that material back and forth.
I think Rhodes is getting those, but yeah, we need that anyway because we got to get that material out of there. They're two related, but not necessarily joined at the hip concepts.
For folks out there, I mean, a capital project, they have a plan. We call it the CIP. That document only really is tied to the budget for the year we're in. It's kind of a planning document above that.
Well, as the executive and the director of finance identify it, it's a 5-year wish list.
But in year one, it is actually what's in the budget.
Yes. Because as happened in many projects in this county, once they ask for a certain amount of money, once that project gets started, all of a sudden the amount of money they ask for isn't enough. So you've got a half-finished project.
Right.
So you're forced to fund the rest of it.
It's the Vietnam War argument. We're already in it. Let's keep going. Give us more money.
Finish it. Yes.
Well, so I mean, talking about the library, we've already spent $300,000 plus dollars in fiscal year 26 money last year to come up with plans, and that grant, the $7+ million grant from the state, still has not been approved.
Has not been signed by the governor and sent down, and that was asked at the budget meeting where we stood as a county on that. Where was it? And the reply was, it's on the governor's desk waiting for a signature.
So the assumption is that will happen imminently.
Well, yes, but
it was also
from their end.
But it said it was imminent back in September.
That's true.
When we needed, was it 50,000?
No, it was $340,000
at that one time.
Yeah.
We need it right away. to get these grants going.
Correct.
And now we're
So over the last 6-7 months, we've heard repeatedly that it's imminent, it's coming, it's just a matter of being signed.
yeah, it's on the desk waiting to be signed.
It's a big desk.
And the state's in a budget crunch, but the library is going to happen, and I hope it does. But
I would argue, and this would be my argument, I think the county we live in is in a budget crunch. I just don't think we've realized it. And I think there's so many things we could do about it.
Well, this is what worries me, to your point, is very few people at this point doubt that we're in a national economic crisis on many levels. The state is certainly in one. I see that as a state employee. But the way you kind of see the county operate, it's as if it's a boom time and that there's no worries about tomorrow. And that's the fear, is what are we doing now that we're going to really pay for?
Well, the problem, in my belief, is that they look at the savings account of the county. The county has approximately $81 million.
Yeah,
in the surplus. Okay. In this year's budget, there is about 20 million of that being spent. So at the end of 26, there will be about $62 million left. Okay, which we'd all love to have $62 million. But Joe's talked about it before. You've got a water and sewer project coming through in this county.
Yeah, the sanitary district.
Sanitary district, $62 million is going to be gone quicker than you can blink an eye by the time they get the county where the county needs to be. And you just can't say, well, we got all this money, let's spend it, because
it goes quick.
Yeah, there's something else coming down the road.
We looked at the Parsonsburg sewer extension for the West Side Regional Project. We are looking at requested for concept and designs, and that will span multiple years. Additionally, funds each fiscal year are budgeted to be used for small sewer extension projects in areas with failing septics.
So the water sewer master plan, and again, what our main goals are coming in with the sanitary district, as it were, is the Salisbury septic elimination project, where we are already in the hopper with the Parsonsburg to Pittsville, and then the West Side regional wastewater systems. The $850 up front is for that, again, forward funding. You know, we're going to go for every dollar we can in state revolving fund reimbursement and Bay Restoration Fund reimbursement. But you do have to forward fund. So you're talking about the SRF application processes, the consulting, the design work, and all that before you get to construction.
If we go back up even just to March, I mean, talking less than 3 months ago, when our county executive was talking about breaking our revenue cap, her director of finance, Pam Olin, stated income tax, the piggyback tax, which we're at the highest level that we can be at in the state, 3%, is not something you can count on. Now, I would kind of disagree, because they're always about 18 months in the rears. But if we're 3 months pass of when we were going to break the revenue cap, and you're talking about spending $20 million of this the fund balance, so, and they call that PAYGO. That's like a PAYGO capital project, where we have, it's a capital project, but we're not going to bond it. We're going to use it out of our savings account. That just starting to fund the sanitary district, that's just a drop in the bucket.
Well, could the I don't want to use the term conspiracy theory, because I don't think that's necessarily the right term, but could the real ulterior motive of the spending habits of the executive and people in that orbit be that they really do want to just spend down what we have in our surplus, so that they get to a point where they almost force us to vote for busting the revenue cap?
I don't think it's that sophisticated. I think this is more fulfilling campaign promises.
I get
with
that.
Someone else writing the check.
Well, but is not one of the campaign promises, from what it seems like, the push to break the revenue cap and get rid of it?
Not from a conservative platform.
Forget conservative, liberal, moderate. I'm just talking about
our
from
county executive ran on a conservative platform.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying she is one.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that's what she ran on.
Right.
5 of our 7 county council folks are self-identified conservatives. I'm not saying that they are.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, as if you're a business owner, if you owned a $200 million business in Wacomico County, okay, and you see the outlook from the state and from the national realm, politics and economy both, you would say, hey, listen, if we need something, we need to do it, but let's not get rid of all of our eggs out of the basket. Now is not the time to take a big reach.
Right.
Because it's so quick to get into a problem. And you look at the history of this county just 25 years ago, we had ballooning property tax assessments. We did not have a revenue cap then.
Right.
We got the revenue cap at a time we went into a recession, which caused us to have furloughs. Okay, you would say that these things have been resolved, but now we're going to self-inflict them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It seems like we're being forced to spend now so that when we are in the next budget crunch, which I think is coming sooner rather than later, then you're going to have this added pressure of, well, now's the time to get rid of it. Now, now's the time to invest in other ways. Well, that's my concern.
A year from now, our county executive will be proposing the last budget that she'll propose before the next election. It would be highly convenient if we can mask the budget problems for that much longer, because it will make getting reelected a whole lot easier.
I agree, yeah.
A lot of our county council has indicated that they're moving on to other things, retiring or moving on to other public office. This is what scares me with overly ambitious politicians, is because I wouldn't mortgage my future for today. But if I'm only worried about getting elected in the next election cycle, it might make it a little bit easier to do that, or actually a lot easier.
Sure.
Yes, and you have to look at if as many as 5 of the 7 council members are looking at possibly moving on. So if you look at the fact that you may have 5 new council members next time who have no experience with dealing with the budget, what's going to happen?
Well,
the first budget under the next executive.
I could tell you what's going to happen. Whoever is the executive is going to run roughshod over that new council. But even before you get to that point, I think the elements in our community that really want to get rid of the revenue cap and that really want to just, invest in their pet projects, they're going to try to compromise anybody running, whether they're conservative, liberal, or not, to make sure something is passed in the near future that gets rid of that.
If I was looking at my crystal ball, only because our current county executive has stated on numerous radio interviews that she's going to run with a slate of candidates.
Sure, yeah.
Once you come in with the next group, it's very easy just to blame the old group on all the woes. And because they're not there, they can't be held accountable anymore at that point.
Sure, yeah.
But the rest of us will be paying the tax bill.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's a great opportunity that we have the surplus we do. I think we should be proud of that. And I do think the county executive should be proud of the fact that she's part of a county that is in the surplus. I don't think she's actually given it to us, but she's there.
She's benefiting from it.
She's benefited from it. And look, we all benefit from it. But I think we should nurture this thing really well to the point that, hey, looking at spending $10 million out at Sharps Point to move soil that hasn't been moved in 7 years, and we're having to move it quickly and at a high cost because it needs to be moved now.
And not notifying the people at Sharps Point about it.
Well, no transparency there, but the conversation came up the other day about 2 new dump trucks being purchased. Yeah. But we don't even know what department they were purchased in.
Or the cost of them.
And who's going to use them and how often. I heard you say, who's using these dump trucks? Well, who's paying for these dump trucks?
How are we in a position we're buying new dump trucks and we don't actually know how much they cost and who's using them?
Well, somebody knows how much they cost and somebody's using them.
The
public doesn't know.
Yeah, why is that not at the table at a council meeting? That's what I want to know.
Right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode.
I know what I'm doing, man.